Solo this week, y'all. Hope everybody's doing good and have had a great fall so far. This won't be a super long episode, but this is something that I'm kind of processing and dealing with. Interestingly enough, there's been a couple other people who have talked a little bit about this, but I'm going to get into why I feel like maybe I'm coming at it from a different angle. Just to remind people, if you haven't been listening to this podcast from the very beginning, um, I have not spent my whole life hunting. I started bow hunting 3 years ago. Did some small game hunting when I was younger with my uncle, but my dad didn't hunt. I spent the majority of my life on a football field every fall. And so I have been learning as an older dude. Um, and I went up to Illinois back at the end of October, beginning of November for the rut. I've got family that owns some property up there. One of them is a 100-acre piece that is mostly ag. It was corn this year. Um, there's a little bit of timber behind it with a creek running through it, which it used to be a better piece of property than it is now. But the piece of property behind it now is over 1,000 acres and is heavily managed for deer. So there's some food plots. There's a lot more over there. And we don't get the same kind of traffic coming through this property anymore. I think there was only one or two mature bucks that have showed up on trail camera the entire fall, but it's a lot better than what I have in South Carolina. So that's what I've done the last couple of years. I was actually going to go to Missouri this season, and they didn't have the beans in. The guy that leased the property had actually planted beans all the way up to the fence row, and I only have access to that property from the north and the south. And so my access wasn't amazing to begin with, but I had planned on getting in through a creek bottom, and my access was kind of jacked up because of um, the beans not coming in. So I pivoted, went to Illinois. So here's the point of my entire deal. I ended up shooting a 2.5-year-old 8-point, not a very big deer. And to be honest with you, it's something that I've been kind of processing a lot and even had some remorse over for stupid reasons. The deal is, right, it's not the title of this is I didn't shoot a hammer, a Magnum, a giant, like all the terms that you see on every Instagram post. It seems like everybody in the world is dropping a 170 or bigger this time of year. And a lot of the people that I know that I've had on this podcast are really, really good hunters. And so, they're shooting multiple deer that size throughout the course of the season. Um, and I have made the mistake, at least in talking to a lot of people I know in the past, of letting some deer go that I probably should have shot. So part of that comes from the very first season I hunted. I went up to Illinois, and I probably got lucky, to be honest with you. Um, right time, right place. They had just brought the corn in a day before I got there. They only brought in the first 4 rows, so they were limited to where they could feed. And I knew a pretty good location where they bedded, and made the bet that I was going to get one, coming from bedding and feeding as it transitioned into the evening. And I did. I shot a 135, a nice sized 8-point, big eye guards, really good character, really cool deer. The problem is when you shoot that for your first deer, you tend to be a lot pickier as to what you shoot. And so you don't shoot as many things. Last year, I literally let multiple deer pass that most, just about anybody listening to this, you would have let it pass. Okay. But as a newer hunter who probably should be shooting more, I didn't, based upon A, what I had shot the first year, but then B, all the stuff, quite honestly, that that you see on social media. There is some pressure, especially when a bunch of guys that are dropping huge deer, to not hunt your own hunt. And I've heard some people, say that, but honestly, when you look at social media, it literally feels like everybody's dropping a 170. Um, and whether we admit it or not, right now, a lot of people are hunting with an invisible audience in mind. Um, there's a lot less people saying, "Hey, does this deer make me happy?" And a lot more people saying, "What are people going to think if I shoot this deer?" Um, and the crazy part is a lot of those guys are hunting situations that don't look like the ones most of us are hunting, right? So when I was kind of processing this whole thing, um, I think it was Joe Miles who I've gotten a lot of advice from. I was talking to him in the off season, and one of the things he said to me is, "You can't get good at shooting big deer if you don't get good at shooting deer." And he's like, "You need to stop worrying about the size of the deer you're shooting. You're not a guy who's hunted for 30 years. You need to get good at shooting deer. So whether that's does or smaller bucks or whatever, um, focus more on, being good in the moment." And so that was one of the things that I was kind of in the back of my head as I went into this hunt. I was thinking about that, but at the end of the day, we're all the same, right? I was going in thinking, hey, same property I shot a nice deer on. For me, a 135 is a really nice deer. And I would have been ecstatic with another deer similar to that. So I was on the same property thinking, hey, um, you know, I I hope I'm going to shoot the same kind of deer. I was actually kind of expecting to shoot the same kind of deer. Um, and so day one, um, I got there, I hung a set, and I was inside, but pretty close to the field. To be honest with you, I wanted to kind of get an idea of what was going on. I knew where the deer traffic had been in the past. I knew where there were a couple doe groups, and so I sat that first evening after I got into town, um, and literally did not see a deer. Didn't see a doe. Didn't see a buck. Nothing. Um, the next day, I hunted two other locations. One behind the creek, and then one up kind of on a corner by a travel route where I thought that bucks might be pushing does. Again, didn't see a single deer. Day 3 morning, I decided that I was going to sit a like a redneck type blind that was sitting pretty close to the same area that I had killed this deer a couple of years before. Um, I thought, okay, I can get into this through the creek, and then I can get in there, have a chance in the morning. Again, the bad part about this is there's still standing corn this year, right? So that was not the case last year. So could not see nearly as well, and there were a lot of deer bedding in the corn. So I was going to go in through the creek, but they had gotten a ton of rain the week before I came in there, and so the creek, which in the past had been ankle high, was literally past the waist, and I didn't I didn't have waders with me. I didn't anticipate that kind of water. Um, and so I did the best I could. I took my e-bike down as far as I could, and then I walked in the last couple hundred yards. And as I got probably, I don't know, 15 or 20 yards from the blind, I I busted a big buck. Like, I mean, I could tell by the way he ran, by the sound, the heaviness. He was a good sized buck, and he was probably 10 yards inside the corn, and only about 20 yards from the blind. So this was before sunlight, about an hour before sun came up. So I got in the blind, sat the blind, literally didn't see a deer all morning long, didn't see a deer all afternoon long. I made the decision. I was originally going to leave, but because I had busted that buck out, and I texted a couple of my buddies that do a lot of this, and they're like, "Hey, there's a decent chance he's going to swing back around." So I ended up doing a dark to dark in this blind. Um, I had a good south wind, um, and about 20 minutes, 30 minutes before last light, I thought I heard something snap south of me, and I dropped the window just a minute to see if I could see. I felt good about it because the wind was blowing in my face. And as soon as I put the window down, I smelled the ruddiness. Like I knew there was a buck out there, and probably the same buck. um, and so I was just kind of sitting, hoping he was going to come in, and didn't. With about 10 minutes left in last light, I grunted once, and I got a snort wheeze back from him. And I just kind of sat still, hoping that he might take that as a challenge and kind of come in. Nothing. About 5 minutes left. I grunted again. I got another snort wheeze. Um, Started running out of time at this point. I only had a few minutes left. So I snort wheezed back at him and I heard him take off running. So that was the end of that day. That was day 3. And then on the next day, that was the morning sit, and I'll kind of go through that in a few minutes. But that was the day that I shot this 2.5-year-old smaller 8 point. So I mentioned a minute ago that social media is really impacting the way that we hunt, and I'm going to say it impacts. It definitely had an impact on the way that I hunted, the way that I thought, and it put me kind of in this, this feeling of that I should be shooting something bigger than, to be quite honestly, than I probably should be at my point in the game with my knowledge level, my experience level. For me to think that I'm gonna go in, and on the regular drop, a good mature deer is not reasonable based upon my conversations with a lot of guys that have been doing this for a long time that are really good at it. But I still put that pressure on myself because the people I know, that's what they're shooting. That's the stuff that I see on Instagram. The guys that I all follow, those are the deer they're shooting. Um, Now, with that being said, you know, the people that I'm comparing myself to, by and large, not all of them. There are some guys that are the outliers. Um, a lot of them are making themselves a living hunting. They're in the industry, right? Whether they're people that own companies that make products for the hunting industry, and they're hunting as part of the promotion of those products, whether they're people who have television shows, people who have podcasts. They're all making a living off of hunting, other than a few. There's a few guys that are not doing that I know. And honestly, they're some of the best hunters I know. So it's not everybody, but it's a lot of people. And even the people that aren't, that this isn't their primary resource, they're still sponsored by people and they're still benefiting from the industry. So it behooves them, to shoot good deer and put good deer on their social media feeds. Um, a lot of people are hunting heavily managed farms. They've got food plots. They've got age structure in their deer herd. They've got very low pressure. They're only going in when they feel like they can kill that animal. They don't have multiple people hunting on that property, and they've got these deer have a real chance to get to 6-7 years old. Um, and then most of us, at least myself, most of the guys that I know that listen to this podcast, we're weekend warriors, or we're guys who are taking a week off to go hunt the rut somewhere on permission pieces, or a lot of you guys are hunting public land. I've got family land, but it's not land that I get to go scout all season long, and those kinds of things. I get up there, I do the best I can based upon where I've got trail cameras that are giving me some intel, but I'm still getting to know these properties since it's only my 3rd season. So, but we put this insane amount of pressure on ourselves um, when we're not comparing apples to apples. Excuse me, I'm going to get a drink of water here real quick. But here's the deal. I fell for this too, man. I found myself passing on deer that I had no business passing last year. Last year I went to Missouri. I've got family who's got 180 acres in Missouri. It doesn't have a very high deer density. It's actually pretty low. Um, there are not a lot of big deer on this property. It's a transitional piece of property, but there are some decent deer that move back and forth through it. And I had 2 different 6 points that I let, actually, sorry, 2 different 8 points, not big ones. They were both 2.5-year-olds that I let walk, within 10 yards of me last year, in the hopes that I was going to see something bigger. And the only time I saw something bigger was on the last night, right after I had lowered my bow to the ground, when I was kind of frustrated, hadn't seen anything of any good size. I was getting ready to pack up. There was literally 5 minutes left in last light. Put my bow on the ground, and as soon as my bow hit the ground, a big 10-point walked out from the tree line. So lesson learned, right? But the point is, those are deer I should have shot, right? When I go back to what Joe told me this past summer, hey, you're not going to get good at shooting big deer unless you get good at killing deer, right? And that line really stuck with me all off season. If you want to shoot a big mature whitetail someday, which I do, um, you got to get reps. I know this, right? I'm a football coach. I've spent my entire life on reps. I can't imagine how many repetitions my guys would go through before they actually got to a competitive situation, right? Before they actually got to a game. But I wasn't giving myself the same opportunity. I was sitting here thinking, hey, you got to wait for the big one. You got to wait for the big one. But there's a couple problems with that. I'm not a good enough hunter yet to get on a big one unless I just get lucky, right? The guys that I know are killing really big deer, unless they're on a private piece of property that they are heavily managing and they know exactly, when and where that deer is probably going to show up based upon the wind and all their experience on that piece of property. That's one group of guys that are killing big deer. The other group of guys that are killing really big deer are really damn good hunters. Guys who have been doing this their whole life, that can go out, scout a piece of property over the course of a few days, know by looking at maps, know by looking at the time of the season, where's my best opportunity to get on a really big mature deer. And most of the time they do, because they just know how to put it all together. And for me, I don't. It's no different than coaching, right? I've only not coached for 3 years. Up until that point, I coached for a very long time. And I would have young guys come up to me like, how do you know when to call that play? Like, how did you know that was going to work against that defense? Well, when I was 23 and I was just starting to learn as a coach, I didn't know. And I remember sitting in the room watching the guys that were a generation ahead of me doing the same thing, going, gosh, how do they know to do that? Well, it took me, 10, 15, 20 years to get to the point to know where to do that, right? To get to the point to know, hey, if I got two deep safeties, I want to attack the middle of the field. Hey, if I got, three deep safeties, I want to attack the seams. Hey, if they give me, cover one blitz off the edge and they leave my back unblocked, I can free release and swing them out and get them, one-on-one with an outside linebacker. Like, those are things that you learn, and then you figure out, okay, what's that look and how do I take advantage of that? Hunting's no different. It takes a lot of reps to get to the point where you even get a shot on a mature whitetail. And I am not there in my skill set yet. Where I am at is I so far have been able to put myself in a position on a fairly regular basis to get a shot on an immature whitetail. The problem with me is I wasn't taking it, right? And so when I go back to the advice that Joe gave me, then if you're always waiting on a Magnum, if you're always waiting on a toad, whatever you want to call it, you're barely hunting. You're basically bird watching. You got to get reps in the stand. You got to get reps in adrenaline control. You've got to get reps in drawing back on a real animal instead of a foam target. Um, so, just to kind of go back and talk about that, like, perfect example. I went out and did a guided elk hunt in September this past fall. Day two, um, and now let me just preface this by saying I shoot my bow all the time. Like, I am fanatic about shooting my bow. As a young hunter, I'm a good shot. Um, I probably, at a minimum, shoot 15 to 20 arrows a day. But when I'm getting ready for the season, I'm doing 40 to 50. I was shooting, 60 to 80 yards consistently in a softball size group as I was getting ready to go to Colorado. So I'm a good shot. Um, and when we went out to Colorado, I went guided. The second day, we had been chasing a herd bull around, big one, like a nice sized bull, a 360 bull. But the second day, we were kind of in this magical situation where we were in this meadow that was only about 120 yards deep, and there were literally 6 bulls in it. None of them were the big dog, but there was a couple younger ones in the willows just kind of thrashing around. There was a couple other ones that were sparring over in one corner. One was just lay down bedded, and then there was another one who was just kind of, walking around, but they were all outside of bow range. They were all like 100, 120 yards, other side of the meadow. And we were just kind of tucked into the willows on this opposite side. Um, and there was a 6 point in there that, my guide said to me, "Hey, is that an elk you would shoot?" And he was a nice, he was nice. He was close to probably 300, maybe a 290 bull. And I was like, "Yeah, I would shoot him. He's gorgeous." And he's like, "Well, based upon the way these guys are moving, there's a decent chance that him or, some of them are going to feed through here." And, we were kind of tucked into this corner of the willows, and there was a tip, like an edge out here, and they were all over here. And if they were going to feed across to this other meadow over here, they were going to kind of come right past this edge. There was a couple cows that had already done it. Um, and that was going to put them right at about 80. So I had basically decided, he had said, "Hey, you know, be ready for that to happen if you want to shoot that bull." And so, okay, we were probably tucked up in there for 45 minutes to an hour. Um, and then they started moving, and one of them fed by, not a shooter. A couple more cows came through, another one fed by, not a shooter. The 6 point that I would have shot was kind of bedded the whole time. He stood up, he starts walking. And when he starts walking, um, sorry about that. You know where he's walking to. He's coming the same direction they all are, right? So I know he's going to give me a shot. So he's at about 100 yards. And like, I kid you not, I literally, like, my adrenaline, it's just, I have not had my adrenaline go that high before. I mean, when I shot that first whitetail that I shot him at 33 yards, and I got, I got adrenaline dump. But as somebody who's been an athlete my whole life, has coached in high pressure situations, during that situation with that whitetail, I recognized what was going on. I did some deep nose breaths. I got myself under control. I shot a controlled shot. I felt great about it. Like, it was a great shot. I put him, like, literally put it right through the back of his heart, double lunged him. He died in like 30 yards. So this was my only kill up until this point, but it was a good one. And I thought that's what I did in a pressure situation. Now, back to what I said before. I let multiple smaller bucks go last season and didn't end up shooting anything. So it's now been almost 2 seasons since I shot that whitetail. And in my head, I'm like, "Hey, that's the way I shot that whitetail. That's the way I shoot deer," right? I'm an idiot. Um, that's what I thought. And when this elk started coming towards me, and part of it, I think, is just a result of how much I had been watching. Like, they had been scraping, they had been bugling. Like, it was one of the coolest situations I've ever seen. Like, when you see stuff on YouTube, like, this is one of those things where you're like, "Damn, does that happen somewhere?" And so I was kind of already amped up. And when I knew I was going to get a shot on him, I mean, he got to 80, and I stopped him. But I kid you not, my freaking adrenaline was so high that I do not like, I didn't think about that shot 1 second. Now, I have had Joel Turner on this show. I used his process before I ever had him on this show. That's how I shoot, right? I have a very clean walkthrough process when I shoot. It is grip, draw, anchor, aim. Here I go. Pull, pull, pull. That's how I shoot. And I do that every time I shoot out in the yard. Well, this was pull it back, let it go. That's literally it. I literally pulled my bow back, put the pin on him, barely. I barely remember putting the pin on him, and I let it fly. It was good up and down, and I put it right in front of his brisket, probably like half I don't know, a foot and a half, but like straight in front of him. I slap out missed him, like, clean. And then he just kept on walking. So I was like, "Holy crap. I missed the freaking crap out of that deer," or excuse me, out of that elk." But the point I'm making is, like, okay, I hadn't shot anything for 2 seasons, right? And so You don't get good at killing things by not killing things, right? You have to get reps. So while I blew that, that was a rep. It was a rep I needed. And what happened 2 days later, in between that shot and the next time I was gonna get a shot, I recognized that I just completely blew that whole thing. And so I just kept talking to myself after that. I was like, "Okay, the next time you get a shot, you're not gonna rush it. Like, if you have to rush it, you're not gonna take it. So the next time you get a shot opportunity, you're gonna walk through your process, you're gonna do it the right way, and if you can't, then you're not gonna take the shot." Right? I kept telling myself that over and over and over. And on day 4, after about a 2.5-hour stalk through willows and a river and crawling on our hands and knees and hiding behind cottonwoods and finally getting a shot at 80 yards on an elk, I did it. I pulled back. I stayed in the shot mentally. I walked myself through the process. I put it on him at 80. He ran about 60 yards out in the middle of the meadow, laid down, and died. So the point of this whole conversation around that is I screwed the pooch on the first shot, and it's because I hadn't had any reps on a live animal for a long time. And I, like I said, I shoot like crazy out. I practice, out to 80 in my yard. Like I can shoot at distance in my yard. It was not a lack of practice. I practice every day. It was a lack of practice in a game situation. It was a lack of practice in an adrenaline filled scenario. It was a lack of practice on a live animal. You cannot kill big animals if you don't get good at killing smaller animals, right? You got to get reps. And so I take that back to the initial kind of point of this whole thing is the reason I didn't take those shots last year when I could have had reps on multiple deer is because I didn't think they were big enough. I didn't think they were big enough because the stuff people were posting on social media that I knew were all really big deer. And and I let my ego get in the way, quite honestly. I didn't want to put up a little, pissant 2.5-year-old when everyone else I knew was, dropping hammers, dropping toads. And also, I don't know how to take a picture very good, and other people take their pictures really good because I've seen some of those deer in person, and I've seen them on the picture, and they look literally twice as big in the picture. So there's a trick around the whole zoom lens and all that crap, which you guys probably know a lot better than I do, that makes it look even bigger than it really is. But which you'll see from the thumbnail on my episode here, I took that, like, didn't even think about taking the picture when the deer was on the ground because he was in a little freaking drainage and I couldn't get the camera to stay up, and I just got super freaking frustrated, and so I field dressed him and threw him in the back of a back of a side by side and took a picture, and then I was done. I was like, it was one of those deals. But when I was hunting him, I was kind of like, it was a really cool hunt. Okay, so here's the thing: he's not a big deer, but when you look at the way the hunt went down, it was really freaking cool. I had not seen a deer the whole morning. It was like 9:30. And I had decided I was going to do rattling sequences that day. I hadn't rattled the whole time I'd been there. And I had the the black antlers from Illusion. Those things are awesome. And when I went in, I basically started rattling after the sun came up, and I did a rattling sequence every 30 to 45 minutes. Um, and after the third rattling sequence, probably 20 minutes later, I went to grab a drink out of my pack. And no sooner had I, like, put my antlers down than I heard some noise from this travel corridor right kind of 20 yards behind the edge of this field. And there's this kind of corner area. I was sitting out on a little bit of a point. There was a corner here on the field. There's a travel corridor back behind that corner. And all of a sudden, coming out of that corner was this deer. And he was coming at a pretty good clip. He was kind of looking for what was going on. Like, he wasn't cautionary at all. He just kind of came out, wasn't, kind of came out jogging, looking around like, where is everything? He was moving so fast that I didn't even have time to get my bow off my bow hanger and get it up by the time he crossed my face, because the edge of this thing was literally only probably 30 yards from where my stand was. He went straight in front of me and went down about another 30 yards. And I turned around opposite side of him, away from him, and I just threw a grunt at him. And all of a sudden he stopped, turned around, came back, started heading back towards me. So at this point, I got my bow out, right? I'm ready for him. He gets right in front of me. He's at about 20 yards, 18 yards. And I give him a minute to stop him, and he doesn't stop. He hears that minute and he takes off freaking hard charging straight into the freaking tree line. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I just freaking screwed that one up. Well, he was pretty aggressive. And so I thought, well, I'm not going to just let him go. Let's see what happens. I heard him run back into the tree line, probably, I don't know, 30, 40 yards. And I got back on the antlers about 2 or 3 minutes later, and I did a little, kind of light sparring session. And dang, if he didn't, like 5 minutes later, come trotting back out. And this time when he came back out, I didn't try to stop him. I pulled back, and he was moving pretty slowly, and I shot, and honestly, the first shot was not good. It was a bad shot. Like, I spined him and I dropped him. And then I quickly put a second arrow in, and I was able to put the second arrow in the vitals, and he expired pretty quickly. Now, again, reps, right? The elk that I had shot was from the ground. The first deer that I had shot a couple of years ago was from a blind. It was only 8 feet in the air. And I make a common mistake, even when I'm practicing from a tree stand, of drawing back my bow and sometimes not bending at the waist, sometimes drawing my bow, at an angle already. And anytime I do that, I shoot high. Well, in the time of the situation, that's probably what I did, because I put it higher than I wanted to put it. Luckily, I was able to get a second shot in there pretty quickly. But I learned a ton from that, right? I got another rep. Now, if it was last year, I would have let this deer walk. I wouldn't have shot it. Maybe I would have got on a mature deer, but with my hunting skill set, maybe I wouldn't have, probably a better chance that I wouldn't have than I would have. And then what would have happened? I would have gone another year without a rep out of a tree stand. And so at the end of the day, I needed those reps. But the sad part about this whole thing was, as he was coming out towards me, and I really hate to admit this, but I am going to admit it. I was looking at him going, I was super excited. I finally, like, I rattled this deer in. Like, I did a thing, right? That as a newer hunter was really cool. And as he came out, I was looking at him going, he's not very big. Should I shoot him? And like, in a million kind of floods of thoughts, was like, he's not very big. I didn't think he's not going to look good on the Instagram, right? I didn't think that in my head, but I think that's all part of the thought process of he's not very big. Because I think if I didn't look at social media, and if social media wasn't such a big part of hunting, and I was just hunting in a vacuum for me, I didn't look at deer on the Instagram. I wasn't going to post my pictures on Instagram. If none of that stuff went on, would I have thought a second time about shooting this deer? I would not have. I would have been like, hell yeah, I just rattled in a deer. First time I've ever done that. That's super cool. But I didn't do that. I was literally like hedging against whether I should shoot him or not. And the thing that actually, got me to shoot him was, I had like Joe's voice in my head. Hey, you're not going to kill mature deer until you get used to killing deer. But it was battling this thought of, wow, he's not going to wow anybody, which is so freaking sad, y'all, that I even have that thought. Because the moment that arrow like hit, I went through all these different emotions that are part of the hunt, that are part of the pure component of the hunt, part of the reason that we actually do hunt, right? I mean, I eat all this meat, right? I don't just hunt to kill stuff. I'm like most of you guys, right? I'm putting the meat in the freezer. Um, and I went through a series of emotions that I would never have gone through had I not taken that shot. The first one was not a great shot. I spined him. I know a lot of really good hunters who have spined deer. And then I put a second shot in him that he expired pretty quickly from. But I got to tell you, like spining him, I felt like terrible. I went through this like the minute it happened and I realized what I had done, I was like devastated by the whole thing. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I did not put a fatal shot on this animal. This is what I've been training to do forever, and I screwed it up." And it's not that I screwed it up, it's this animal deserves better. And that means I've got to be better at what I do. And again, through the grace of God, I was able, even though he was on the ground, to get a good shot at him from the tree stand and, to help him expire quickly. But that first set of emotions that I went through imprinted on me like how important it is to make sure that I did everything right. Even though I had practiced a ton, I don't think I practiced enough from an elevated position. I'm going to do a ton more of that next year. I've actually been doing a ton of it since I got back. Um, Again, a learning experience through the rep, right? Um, I would not have gotten that experience had I let that deer pass. And then the second one, and I went down. This was the first animal that I field dressed on my own. The first deer that I killed, my cousins were there with me. We brought it in together. It was kind of like a communal event. We dressed him out in the barn, hung him up, did the whole thing. My elk, I was guided. We were with a bunch of guys. They want to get it done quickly so that they can get into the barn and everybody can have dinner. So that was a quick job. I was by myself on this. I could have called somebody, but I didn't because I wanted to do it myself. And quite honestly, it was like, I mean, I'll admit it. It was I couldn't remember all the stuff I was supposed to do. And so, I had actually saved a video on field dressing a deer just for this very specific situation. And I pulled it up and I looked at it to remind myself of the stuff that I couldn't remember. And I did it. And I field dressed it myself. It was not pretty. Honestly, it probably looked like the predator got at the thing, but I did it, right? It was the first time I'd ever done it. And so by not passing on this animal, I went through this spectrum of experiences from feeling bad, feeling like I need to be better, finishing what I had started, doing something that I had no knowledge about, and finally getting some experience doing it. Like literally this huge gamut of experience that I went through in this, hour long period of time that I would not have gone through if I had just passed on this deer because he wasn't going to look good on the gram. And that would have made me a much worse hunter. And quite honestly, that's the part right there that I think is the worst part about this whole thing is that there are so many people out there that are missing out on the experience of what hunting truly brings because they feel this pressure to put a certain kind of animal on social media or to look a certain way as a hunter, to present themselves as whatever, this expert hunter or this guy that only shoots, 170 plus deer or whatever. And it's not even that they're trying to be, like Billy Badass. It's not that they're not trying to do that. They're literally, in most cases, trying to keep up with the Joneses, right? It's like the guy who feels like he's got to buy a certain kind of car, even though he may not have the money to buy it because the neighbor's got it. It's the same thing. It's not hunting for the experience. It's hunting for other people's perception of your experience. And that, honestly, that's not what hunting is about. And it's sad. It's sad that it's having that impact on people. It's sad that it had that impact on me. I'm glad that I got that advice from someone that I trust that that kind of pushed me through that barrier and caused me to shoot that animal, because he doesn't look good on the gram. But what he gave me is essential, and is something that I can't earn unless I do it, right? Killing big deer is a skill. Skill requires reps. The reality of it is, killing on any animal is a skill. Whether it's big or small, it still takes skill to execute it the right way. It still takes skill to execute a shot when you are high on adrenaline. It still takes skill to execute a shot in a higher stress environment. You don't build confidence passing on animals when you are a newer hunter, or even when you are not a newer hunter, but somebody that doesn't get a lot of reps. Skill is built on execution. No different than any other sport there is. No different than everything I always told my players. It does not matter whether you've done it 100 times. It matters whether you can do it one time and execute it the right way when it matters, when it's time to perform. That is the difference. And you don't get good at that without playing the game. You can practice all day long, day after day, but if you never play the game, it is not the same rep. If you are brand new or you're still learning, you only get 1 to 2 tags a year. Expecting perfection is unrealistic. And again, taking it back to, coaching my players, like, hey, there's a reason when you watch football, college football is what I love. But if you watch the NFL, whatever sport you watch, there's a reason that the guy who's been there for 3 years and has played 50 games anticipates everything, does everything, snap of the finger, responds to things, sees things before they happen, versus the freshman who's an amazing athlete but still gets beat. He's not getting beat because he's a great athlete. He's getting beat because mentally he does not know what's going to happen next, and the guy that's across from him does. That is what we are talking about. And you don't do that unless you have experience. And so at the end of the day, you don't get experience unless you take the shot, right? I'm saying this as much for myself as I am for everybody else. I am not giving you advice. I'm telling you, this is something that I am learning and have learned through experience this year. Shoot what's going to make you grow as a hunter. I mean, I've heard a lot of shoot what makes you happy, but the reality of it is, I would have been happier if I had shot a 150 or 160, right? I would have much rather shot a 160, but the shot presented itself, and I had made the decision that I had been there 4 days already. I had 2 left. There's a bunch of crap at home work-wise. I didn't have to get to it, but I did feel it pressing on me. And that's no different than every one of you probably listening to this. You've all got jobs, you've all got careers, we've all got families, right? You never know what's going to happen when you leave, even though you mark that entire week out. You go away, something happens, right? Your wife's having a really hard time with the kids. Something happens back at the job. You got a client who's pressing on you big time. There's a health concern, whatever. Sometimes we kind of feel the pressure to get back sooner than we plan. And so I had been there 4 days already, and I didn't have to take the shot. I could have waited, but I did not want to walk out of there empty-handed. I wanted to get the reps. So what I would say is, like, take a break sometimes from social media. Like right now, um, I deleted Instagram this morning, and I'm not going to put it back up for a few days, other than like when I post this episode, I'll put it up and I'll like put it in the reels, and then I'm going to take it back down again for probably a week. I need to take a break from it sometimes, and I try to do that like once a month. But sometimes you got to stop looking at what everybody else is doing and just think about like what's best for my process. And I'm not going to hang on for big deer until I know that I'm a better hunter. And better hunter doesn't just mean better shooter. It means better at getting on them, better at reading sign, better at knowing, different times of the year where can I probably find those kind of deer, better at picking where I hunt. Those are all things that go into it. But I'm not going to sit and watch a bunch of deer walk by me, waiting for that opportunity until it comes, which may not be 2-3 years from now, and then never having gotten a rep when it finally happens and screwing the pooch on a 180 that I've been waiting for 5 years to get. I'm going to get reps so that when I get to that opportunity, whether it's 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I'm proficient and I trust my shot. And I've put in the time, put in the reps on real animals where I feel like I'm ready to execute that shot and it's not going to get the best of me. So, hey, as you can see from the thumbnail, my Illinois buck was not a hammer, wasn't a Magnum, wasn't a giant, wasn't a toad, but he made me better. And that's something that a tape measure can't score. So thanks for everybody joining me today. I appreciate you hanging on and listening to this. Hopefully you got something out of it. Don't sweat what everybody else is doing. I'm super happy for all these guys that are knocking big deer down, and because it's their hunt and it's freaking awesome for them. So I don't look at it begrudgingly. I just look at it and go, that's not me right now. And I would just challenge you to do the same thing. Be honest with yourself about where you are in your hunting journey. And then if that's where you are, like if you're that far along that you're like, hey, the only thing that really, I'm a 170 is my season and I'm going to shoot it or not. And if I don't, I'm good. If you're that good, then great. But if you're the guy that like maybe gets, 1 or 2 good opportunities a year and you go multiple seasons without shooting anything, and then you get into rifle season and you're like, oh, I didn't shoot anything with a bow, I'm just going to shoot it with a rifle. Like, I'm not denigrating rifle hunting, but if you really want to shoot something with a bow, like start where you can. And when you get a shot opportunity at a decent deer or even a doe or whatever, take it, right? And get good at executing the shot, get good at killing deer so that when you get to the point where you have a shot on a mature deer, you can execute it and it doesn't get the best of you. Appreciate y'all joining me. Thanks so much. I'll be back in a couple of weeks with a couple cool episodes that I think everybody's going to enjoy. Thanks so much for joining me, guys. Have a good one.